The first time my stepmother called me the practice daughter into a microphone, I was holding a tray of deviled eggs in front of 37 people and trying not to drop them on her white patio stones. It was my father's 60th birthday, a hot Saturday in Ohio. The kind where the air smelled like cut grass, charcoal, and somebody's coconut sunscreen. Beverly had rented linen-covered tables and a little speaker system, because in her mind, a backyard party was not complete unless everyone could hear her being charming from 2 houses away. She smiled at me like we were sharing a joke. "Before we toast the real kids," she said, "let's thank Nora for helping. Every family needs a rehearsal run." People laughed because they thought they were supposed to. My half-sister, Paige, covered her mouth with her champagne glass. My father looked down at the lighter in his hand and kept trying to spark the candles on his own cake, even though they were already lit. I stood there with paprika under my thumbnail and Beverly's voice still bouncing off the windows. For a second, all I could hear was the ice machine in the garage grinding out cubes. Then someone near the hydrangeas said, "Oh, Beverly," in that soft warning tone people use when they are not going to help you. I should tell you why I was still there. I was 34 years old, not a child waiting to be chosen. I had my own apartment, my own job, my own bills, and a key to a studio where I restored old furniture for people who cared more about good wood than fast money. I knew how to strip 100 years of varnish without gouging walnut. I knew how to match a missing spindle by eye. I knew how to keep my hands steady when something fragile was splitting along a seam. But in that family, the minute I stepped through Beverly's side gate, I became the extra chair, the borrowed plate, the person who could be moved wherever there was space. My father had called me 3 days before the party. Not Beverly. My father. He sounded smaller than usual, like he was calling from the bottom of a stairwell. "Nor, I'd like you there," he said. "It would mean something to me." He did not say Beverly had told him not to ask. He did not say Paige and my stepbrother, Grant, had planned the whole thing without me. He just breathed into the phone until I said yes. That was how he got me. Not with force, with need. With the old tired hope that if I showed up calm enough, kind enough, useful enough, I could make a place for myself without anyone having to admit they had kept it empty. So I came early. I brought the eggs because my father liked them with too much mustard. I brought a small repaired footstool from his garage, the one he used when he polished his fishing reels, because one of the legs had been loose for years and I had fixed it without being asked. I also wrapped the damaged original leg separately beneath the paper, not because it could still hold weight, but because it belonged to the history of the piece. I wore a blue dress I had ironed twice. Beverly looked me over at the gate and said, "Oh good, you dressed appropriately," like I had been known to arrive at family events in a raccoon costume. Then she handed me an apron. Not one of the embroidered aprons she had ordered for Paige, Grant, and Grant's wife that said Henderson Family Crew. Mine was a plain black catering apron with a grease stain near the pocket. "Could you keep an eye on the kitchen?" she asked. "You're better with tasks than mingling." That was Beverly's gift. She could insult you in a tone that made refusal sound unreasonable. If you objected, you were sensitive. If you stayed quiet, you became proof she had been right about where you belonged. I tied the apron around my dress and told myself I was there for my father. I arranged napkins. I refilled lemonade. I moved gifts out of the sun. When Grant's wife asked where the trash bags were, Beverly pointed at me without turning her head. The strange thing was, my father kept trying to catch my eye. He did it while neighbors shook his hand, while Paige adjusted the ribbon on the cake, while Beverly lined everyone up for photos by the maple tree. Each time, he looked like he was about to say something, then someone touched his elbow or called his name, and the moment closed. Once, when I passed him with a bowl of ice, he said, "Don't leave right after cake." His voice was low. "I need to show you something." "What?" I asked. But Beverly was already beside us. "Daniel. Smile. Your college friends are here." Then to me, still smiling, "Nora." The coolers sweating on the deck. By the time she picked up the microphone, I had almost convinced myself the day would pass the usual way. A few cuts, a few swallowed replies, then a drive home with all the things I wished I had said banging around in my chest. I had survived worse from them than a stained apron. I had survived Christmas stockings with everyone's names except mine. I had survived being introduced as Daniel's daughter from before. I had survived Beverly telling a church group that blended families required patience with damaged children, while her hand rested on my shoulder like a clamp. But practice daughter was different because my father heard it clearly. Everyone did. The words did not hide inside a kitchen or under a holiday song. They hung there in the sun. And after the laugh moved through the yard, my father finally looked up. He did not defend me. Not then. He blew out the candles because Beverly told him to. Smoke drifted across his face, and the guests clapped, and I carried the deviled eggs back toward the table with my arms locked straight. Halfway there, the repaired footstool I had brought from my studio caught my eye. I had set it by the garage door, wrapped in brown paper, with my father's name written in black marker. The paper had been torn open. The stool was gone. In its place, leaning against the siding like it had been kicked there, was the damaged original leg I had tucked beneath the wrapping. Someone had tied a gift bow around it. I did not pick up the old broken leg right away. That sounds small, but in that moment it was the only thing keeping me from becoming exactly what Beverly wanted in front of her guests. Loud, shaking, ungrateful, easy to explain away. I set the tray of deviled eggs on the folding table in the hall, wiped my hands on the side of my dress, and stared at that little wooden leg tied with silver ribbon like it was a party favor. The split was old, but the insult was fresh. I knew the leg because I had spent 3 nights making a replacement, matching the old stain so Daniel would not see where time had almost won. Somebody had opened my gift before he could. Somebody had taken out the one part I had meant to keep with the history of the stool and staged it like proof that what I brought into that house was always already broken. From the dining room, people laughed at something Beverly said into the microphone. Daniel's candles were still smoking. The whole room smelled like frosting and hot coffee, but near the gift table I caught a different smell, the one I knew better than perfume or food, beeswax polish warming under lights. My footstool was close. Not gone. Moved. I followed that smell past a tower of wrapped presents and through the swinging kitchen door, where Grant's wife looked up from a stack of dessert plates and said, "Oh good, Nora. Can you refill the ice?" I kept walking. The kitchen opened onto the back sunroom, the place Beverly called the garden room, even though the only living things in there were 2 dusty ferns and a line of trapped flies at the window. That was where she had set up the drink station. A glass dispenser of pink lemonade sat on top of my repaired footstool. Not beside it, not near it, on it. The old needlepoint cushion I had cleaned by hand was damp from condensation, and one corner had buckled under the weight. The replacement leg was still attached, but the side rail above it had a slow twist in it now, the kind of stress you could feel before you could see it. For 1 second, I forgot Beverly. I forgot the microphone. I forgot every cousin and neighbor who had just heard me called a starter version of a daughter. I saw only the joinery giving way. I crossed the room and lifted the lemonade dispenser with both hands. It was heavier than I expected, and cold water sloshed over my wrist and ran down my sleeve. The caterer beside me gasped. "Ma'am, don't—" "I've got it," I said. I set the dispenser on the tile floor and crouched over the footstool. One side rail had cracked, not all the way through, but enough. Enough to change it. Enough to make me press my thumb over the split and feel my throat close. I had found that footstool in Daniel's garage 2 months before, under a tarp and a box of Christmas lights. It had belonged to his mother. I remembered my grandmother using it to reach the second shelf in her pantry when I was 5, back when Daniel still brought me around before his life got divided into old family and new family. I restored it because I thought a saved thing might say what I could not. "Nora." Daniel's voice came from the doorway, low and stunned. I did not look at him at first. I slid my palm under the damaged rail, testing how bad it was. "Did you know she did this?" He stepped into the sunroom. His birthday crown, the paper one page had forced on him for pictures, was crooked on his gray hair. He looked ridiculous and sad, and I hated that I noticed the sad part. "No," he said. "I thought it was still by the table. It was wrapped." "I know, it had your name on it." "I know," he said again, and that second time broke something different in me because he sounded ashamed, not surprised. Beverly arrived before I could ask him the real question. She still held the microphone, though it was turned off now, and her eyes dropped to the black catering apron tied over my dress, as if checking whether the uniform was still doing its job. Her smile tightened when she saw the lemonade on the floor. "Nora, honey, we can't have guests tripping over drink dispensers." "It was on my gift," I said. "It was a footstool. It was his mother's footstool." Her eyes moved to Daniel, quick as a thrown pin. And it was sitting there empty while I had 40 people to serve. I made it useful. Daniel opened his mouth. Beverly touched the apron tie at my waist before he spoke. If you need something to do with your hands, keep that on and help with cake. People are waiting. That was the moment I understood the apron was not about help. It was about placing me. In that house, Paige could float from guest to guest with champagne. Grant could slap Daniel on the back, like they had built the day together. I could repair an heirloom, carry food, absorb a joke, and then be handed a uniform when I looked too much like family. Daniel reached for Beverly's wrist, not for me. He lowered her hand from the apron tie. Not now, he said. It was not a brave sentence. It was barely a sentence at all. But Beverly's face changed, because he had said it where she could not pretend she had not heard. The sunroom went quiet, except for ice cracking inside the abandoned dispenser. Daniel, she said softly. He did not look at her. He looked at the footstool. I asked Nora to come because I needed to give her something before the pickup this afternoon. My hand was still under the cracked rail. Give me what? Beverly laughed once without humor. This is not the time. It's my birthday, Daniel said, and the words sounded strange coming from him. As if he had just discovered they could be used as leverage. So maybe it is. Paige appeared behind Beverly with a cake knife in her hand. She looked from the lemonade on the floor to me, crouched over the footstool. What is happening? Nothing, Beverly snapped. But Daniel had already reached into his pocket. His fingers fumbled, and for a second I thought he was going to pull out a speech, a check, some neat little explanation that would make the room easier for him. Instead, he opened his palm and showed me a small brass key darkened with age. Not a house key. Not a car key. The kind of key that belonged to an old lock on an old cabinet. The kind you kept long after everyone else forgot what it opened. The maple tool chest in the basement, he said. Your grandfather's. I put it aside for you. Beverly's smile disappeared completely. Daniel closed my fingers around the key before she could move. His hand was cold. Mine was wet from lemonade. Around us, the party noise started up again in the other room. Louder now, like people were trying not to hear the silence in the sunroom. I looked past Beverly, past Paige, through the kitchen doorway to the hall that led to the basement stairs. At the top of those stairs, taped crookedly to the door, was a bright orange estate sale tag I had not noticed when I came in. It said, "Everything must go." I kept the key closed in my palm while the party tried to keep pretending it was still a party. People were laughing near the dessert table. Someone asked where the coffee was. Beverly's voice floated through the room, bright and smooth, telling everyone to save room for cake. The worst part was not only that the footstool had been used like a drink stand. I repaired damaged things for a living. The worst part was how carefully the broken original leg had been placed outside with a bow, like the insult was part of the decoration. When I finally lifted it from beside the garage door, the old split told me more than anyone in that house wanted to say out loud. The leg itself had been useless before I repaired the stool, but it had not been trash. It was a witness. I had wrapped it because Ruth had taught me never to erase the part that proved something had survived. Beverly had turned that witness into a joke. I carried it through the kitchen because I needed air more than I needed dignity. The catering apron still hung from my neck, and one of Beverly's friends stepped aside with a little embarrassed smile, as if I was a waitress having a bad shift. In the mudroom, I pulled the apron over my head and dropped it onto the washing machine. That small act should not have felt dangerous, but it did. In that house, even taking off the costume Beverly gave me felt like starting a fire. The garage door was half open. I slipped inside and found more than the footstool. The stool itself had been shoved onto Daniel's old workbench, damp cushion up, one rail cracked, the ribbon from my gift still taped to its side. Around it sat things I remembered from before Beverly painted the living room white and silver, and erased every warm thing my father used to own. A maple side table, my grandmother's sewing chair, a narrow cabinet with a cracked glass door. Each one had a colored sticker slapped on it, blue, green, orange. For a second, I saw myself at 9 years old, sitting on that same bench while my grandmother showed me how to hold a scrap of sandpaper around a block instead of scrubbing with my fingers. She had smelled like lemon soap and sawdust. She was the first person in that family who made my quietness feel useful instead of inconvenient. Nora. Daniel stood in the doorway, one hand braced on the frame. He looked smaller out there than he had under the birthday lights. His party shirt was still buttoned neatly, but his face had gone slack. I held up the broken original leg. Did you know? He looked at the stool, then at the concrete floor. I saw it after Beverly's speech. That's not what I asked. He swallowed. From inside the house, everyone shouted, "Speech! Speech!" and then laughed because the speech had already happened. Daniel flinched like the sound had touched him. I didn't know before. Are you going to ask who opened my gift? He rubbed his forehead. Not tonight. Those two words landed harder than Beverly's joke. Not tonight meant there would always be a reason. Birthday. Thanksgiving. Paige's baby shower someday. Grant's promotion. Beverly's headache. Daniel had built a whole life out of waiting for a better time to be decent. I set the leg on the bench with more care than it deserved. Then why did you tell me to come early? You said there was something you wanted to show me after cake. Daniel glanced over his shoulder before stepping fully into the garage. That glance said more than his mouth did. He moved past me to the far wall where old blankets covered a row of furniture and boxes. Grant rented a storage unit, Daniel said, too softly. For what? For things from the garage. Beverly wants it cleared before the contractor comes. I turned on him. Contractor? He looked toward the workbench, not at me. She wants to turn this into a fitness room. Grant says the tools can go to his place. The anger that rose in me was quieter than I expected. It was not the hot kind from the microphone. It was colder. Cleaner. So, you invited me here to pick through what they don't want. No. His voice cracked. And for one breath, I saw the father who used to lift me over puddles in grocery store parking lots. I invited you because some of it should have been yours, before anyone put stickers on it. Before I could answer, Paige appeared in the doorway holding 2 cake plates. She had frosting on one finger, and that careful expression people use when they want to sound kind while stepping on your foot. Dad, Mom's looking for you. They're doing the family picture. I almost laughed. Of course they are. Paige's eyes went to the stool, then to the broken leg on the bench. Nora, please don't make this into a whole thing. I looked at her. It is a whole thing. It's a footstool. It was Grandma Ruth's. Paige shifted, annoyed now. I know who it belonged to. But tonight is Dad's birthday, and Mom has been planning this for weeks. Can you just let him have one peaceful evening? That was the trap. Spoken in a softer voice than Beverly ever used. Peace meant my silence. Family meant their comfort. Love meant I swallowed the broken parts so Daniel would not have to look at them. I turned to my father. Say it matters. Paige made a small sound. Nora. No, I said, still looking at him. Not a speech, not a fight. Just say this matters. Daniel's mouth opened. For one strange second, I thought he might do it. His hand moved toward the workbench and rested on the maple top, fingers spread over an old burn mark from a soldering iron. Then Beverly's heels clicked on the mudroom tile behind Paige. There you all are, Beverly said, smiling like she had walked into a charming family moment, instead of a room full of wreckage. Her eyes flicked to the apron on the washing machine, then to the broken stool leg, then to Daniel's hand on the bench. The smile stayed. The photographer is ready. Daniel did not move. Beverly's voice thinned. Daniel. He looked at me then, and his hand slid under the front lip of the workbench. Your initials are still here, he whispered. I stared at him. Under the vise, he said. You carved them when you were little. Mom caught you and made me promise not to sand them out. I bent before Beverly could stop me. The concrete was cold through my dress, and dust clung to my knees, but I reached under the old iron vise and felt along the wood. There they were. 3 uneven letters cut by a child's hand, hidden where no sticker could cover them. Beverly's smile finally dropped. Stand up, Nora, she said. That bench is going to Grant. The key did not slide in cleanly. It caught halfway, like the chest itself had learned the family habit of refusing me at the last second. Beverly was still above me on the basement steps, one hand on the railing, looking down as if I had crawled under the house instead of kneeling in front of my grandfather's tool chest. Nora, she said, sharp and low. Do not turn this into a theft. That word hit the concrete harder than any shout would have. Theft. I had been handed an apron in front of guests, watched my grandmother's little bench used as a drink stand, found my childhood initials under the vise, and now the one thing my father had put in my palm was being called stolen before I had even opened it. I looked at Daniel. He was standing a few feet from the chest, with his birthday shirt still tucked too neatly into his pants, as if neatness could hold him together. His face had gone gray around the mouth. Paige was behind him, whispering something about everyone needing to calm down, and Grant had one foot on the bottom step, already impatient, already halfway gone to whatever truck or storage unit Beverly had waiting. I did not ask Daniel to rescue me again. I had spent too much of my life turning toward him right after someone hurt me, waiting for him to become the father he almost was. Instead, I pressed the key in deeper, lifted the lid just enough to feel the lock take, and turned. The click was small, but everyone heard it. The maple lid rose with a dry wooden sigh, and the smell came out first. Old oil, iron, shavings, and the faint sweetness of wood that had been closed up for years. It was the smell of Saturday mornings when I was 7, when my grandmother would stand at the basement sink with a chipped mug of coffee and tell me to keep my fingers behind the blade, always behind the blade. The top tray held planes wrapped in soft cloth, 3 chisels in a leather roll, a marking gauge with a dark thumbprint worn into the handle, and a tiny brass hammer I remembered because I had once dropped it on my own foot and tried not to cry. Beverly came down 2 steps. "Those are not toys," she said. I almost laughed, but it would have sounded broken. "I know exactly what they are." "No, you know how to make things sentimental when it benefits you." That was when Daniel moved. He simply crossed the basement floor, bent beside me, and lifted the top tray with both hands. His hands were shaking, and for one awful second I thought he might drop it. I reached up to steady the corner. We held it together, father and daughter, over the open chest, and the weight of it made him look at me in a way he had avoided upstairs. Not guilty, not helpless, just awake. Under the tray was a pencil stub, a square. Across the bib, in uneven blue thread, my grandmother had stitched my name. Not on a tag, not on a scrap. Right across the front, crooked and permanent. Nora. I touched the letters with 2 fingers. The thread was faded, but it had not let go. Paige saw it and went quiet. Grant's wife, who had been standing near the laundry shelves with her arms wrapped around herself, made a small sound in her throat. Beverly's face did something quick and ugly before she smoothed it over. "That could have been made for anyone," she said. "Ruth labeled everything." "No," Daniel said. It was only one word, but the basement changed around it. Even the old dehumidifier seemed to hum softer. Beverly stared at him as if he had spoken a foreign language at her dinner table. Daniel kept his eyes on the apron. "Mom made that after Nora fixed the pantry stool. She was 8. She used the wrong screws and split the side rail, but she stayed down here until dark trying to make it right." He swallowed. "Mom said the child had better hands than half the men in this family." My chest tightened so hard I had to look away. I remembered that stool. Not because I had done it well, but because my grandmother had not laughed when I did it badly. She had put the ruined rail in my hand and said, "Now you know what force does when it has nowhere to go." I had not thought about that sentence in years. Standing there with Beverly above me, it sounded less like a lesson about wood than a warning I had finally grown old enough to understand. Grant broke the silence because he could not stand any silence that did not belong to him. "This is touching, but the pickup guys are coming at 4. If that chest is going, it needs to be near the stairs." "It's not going to storage," Daniel said. Beverly's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me?" He looked terrified rather than strong, but he said it again. "It's not going to storage." Beverly stepped off the last stair and onto the concrete. "You do not get to hand away pieces of this house because you feel guilty at a birthday party." Daniel flinched at guilty, but he did not retreat. He reached into the chest and lifted out something wrapped in brown paper and tied with old cotton string. He held it like it might break from being seen. "This was supposed to be quiet," he said to me. "I was going to bring it by your shop next week." I kept waiting for a clean time. "There was never going to be a clean time," I said. He nodded once, and that nod hurt more than any apology would have. Then he handed me the bundle. The paper had gone soft at the folds. I slipped the string loose and opened it on my knees. Inside was not jewelry, not money, not anything Beverly could easily price. It was an old turned maple leg for the little footstool upstairs, a true mate to the damaged original Beverly had tied with a bow. It was narrow, smooth, and marked with my grandmother's penciled line, still circling the top where a repair was supposed to begin. For a second I could not understand what I was holding. Then the whole room rearranged itself. The stool upstairs had not just been used carelessly. It had been used carelessly in the one place where Ruth had left behind the exact proof that the piece was never junk. Beverly saw my face change. "Don't you dare," she said. I stood with the old apron in one hand and the spare leg in the other. The party noise drifted through the floorboards above us, laughter from people who had no idea the basement had become the real room in the house. I pictured the cracked footstool on the workbench above us, then the tools waiting in the chest, each handle darkened by hands that had actually made room for me. For the first time that day, I did not feel like I was begging for a place in the family. I felt like I was standing in the only part of it that had ever told the truth. Then the doorbell rang upstairs, long and hard, and Grant looked at his phone. "They're early," he said. "That's the pickup crew." The sound that came from above us was not a door closing. It was heavier than that, metal on concrete, followed by a man's voice calling, "Where do you want the big stuff first?" For 1 second, none of us moved. The spare leg lay across my palms, smooth and guilty-looking, its shape matching the footstool upstairs so perfectly that my body understood before my mind finished. Daniel looked at it, then at the ceiling. His face had gone gray in a way I had only seen once before, years ago, when he stood beside Ruth's hospital bed and realized silence would not keep anything alive. Grant's boots hit the basement stairs before anyone spoke. "Beverly said you're holding up the whole pickup," he called down, annoyed before he even saw us. Then he reached the last step and stopped. His eyes went from the open chest to the apron across my arm, then to the leg in my hand. The annoyance drained out of him, and something more slippery took its place. "Why is all that open?" Daniel closed one hand over the edge of the chest. "Because it's mine," he said. His voice cracked on the last word, but it was still his voice. Grant gave a short laugh, the kind people use when they want the room to agree with them. "Okay, but Bev already tagged it. The guys are here early. We can't do this sentimental thing right now." That phrase did something clean and sharp inside me. Sentimental thing. Ruth's name, my hands, the bench, the chest, the apron she had stitched for me, all reduced to a delay in somebody else's remodel. I folded the apron once, carefully, so the name she had sewn stayed visible, and kept the spare leg in my other hand. "No one is taking this chest." Grant's jaw moved. "You don't get to decide that." "No," I said and looked at my father. "He does." The moment stayed ordinary. There was no music, no sudden courage pouring into the basement. Daniel looked tired. He looked trapped. He looked like a man who had spent so long letting other people handle the hard parts that his own backbone felt unfamiliar to him. Above us, the pickup crew rolled something across the garage floor, and the vibration traveled down through the joists. Beverly's voice floated after it, bright and performative. "Careful with those old boxes. Most of it is trash." Daniel flinched at trash, and I saw the fight almost leave him, not because he believed her, but because fighting her meant fighting the version of his life that had let him avoid this basement for years. Paige appeared behind Grant on the stairs, one hand gripping the rail. She looked at the chest and then at me with that exhausted, pleading expression she used whenever I was expected to make myself smaller for everyone's comfort. "Nora," she said softly, "please don't turn this into a scene." I almost laughed. The scene had already been made. It had been made when my grandmother's workbench got stickered like a broken appliance. It had been made when my repaired footstool was used as a drink stand and then mocked with its old broken leg. It had been made upstairs in front of relatives when Beverly called me dramatic for touching the furniture that had raised me. I just happened to be the first person refusing to keep acting like it was invisible. I stepped around Grant with the apron in one hand and the spare leg in the other. He shifted as if to block me, but Daniel said, "Move. Just one word. Quiet." Grant moved. The garage looked different with strangers in it. Two men in work gloves stood near the open back of a truck, waiting beside a dolly. Orange stickers glowed on boxes, chair backs, crates, even on Ruth's old clamp rack. The workbench had a sticker on its front edge, half peeled because the wood was dusty. Seeing that little square of color on the bench made me angrier than the chest had. The chest was closed and stubborn. The bench looked exposed. Beverly stood by the garage door in white sneakers that had never seen yard dirt, holding a clipboard like it was a judge's order. When she saw me coming up from the basement with the apron and the leg, her smile did not vanish. It hardened. "There you are," she said, loud enough for the movers. "I was wondering how long you were planning to dig through things that don't belong to you." One of the pickup men looked away. The other suddenly became very interested in adjusting a strap. Public embarrassment had always been one of Beverly's favorite tools. because she knew I hated making strangers uncomfortable. She knew I would swallow almost anything if enough people were watching. But that day, with Ruth's name against my wrist, the old reflex missed its mark. I held up the turned leg. This was in the chest. Beverly glanced at it too quickly. So? It belongs with the footstool on the bench. Paige whispered, Nora, stop. But Daniel had come up behind me, slower than the rest of us. He stood at the edge of the garage, one hand on the doorframe. His eyes went to the leg, then to the rack, then to the sticker on the bench. Something in his face changed when he saw that sticker. Recognition, not fury. Like the house had finally spoken in a language he could not pretend not to understand. Beverly noticed him noticing. She lifted the clipboard. Daniel, tell them. This has been scheduled for weeks. The contractor starts Monday. He did not answer her. He walked to the bench instead. Everyone watched him cross those few feet. He peeled the orange sticker off the front edge, slowly enough that it tore in two. The sound was small, almost silly, but it stopped the whole garage. Then he took the torn sticker from his fingers and stuck it to the clipboard in Beverly's hands. The bench stays, he said. Beverly's cheeks flushed. Don't do this in front of people. Daniel looked at her then. You did. No one breathed for a second. Grant muttered. This is ridiculous. But he said it softly. Paige stared at our father, as if he had stepped out of a photograph and become someone she did not recognize. Beverly lowered her voice, which somehow made it more dangerous. If you start picking at old wounds because Nora wants attention, you will regret what you're inviting back into this house. There it was, a warning clear enough to count as an admission. My father heard it too. I saw it land in him, and I saw the cost of answering it rise behind his eyes. For a moment I thought he would fold. Then he reached for the apron in my hand. I let him take it. He unfolded it once, saw my name, and pressed his thumb over the crooked blue letters Ruth had made. This house already invited her, he said, before you ever lived in it. Beverly's mouth opened, but one of the pickup men cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said, uncomfortable but firm. We need to know what's going and what's not. Daniel turned toward him. His shoulders were still bent, but his voice carried to the driveway. Nothing from this garage goes on that truck until my daughter and I go through it. My daughter. Not Nora. Not your sister. Not she. My daughter. Beverly stared at him as if those two words had been the real theft. Then she smiled. And it frightened me more than her anger. She set the clipboard on top of a box and said, Fine. If we're telling the truth now, let's tell all of it. Her eyes moved from Daniel to me. Ask him why Ruth locked that chest in the first place. Beverly said it like she had been saving the sentence for years. Tell her why Ruth locked that chest, Daniel. The pickup guys froze with their dollies tipped back near the garage door. Paige went pale in that careful way people do when they already know the room is about to split. My father still had one hand on the old bench, fingers pressed against the scarred front edge where the orange sticker had been, and for 1 second I thought he would do what he had always done. Look down. Breathe through his nose. Let Beverly speak for him because silence was easier than choosing me. But he did not look down. He looked toward the basement door. The garage felt suddenly too small for all of us. The apron with my name was still folded over my arm. The spare leg Ruth had saved lay in the crook of my elbow. Beverly stepped around a box as if anything with dust on it were trash. Go ahead, she said. Tell her how your mother got tired of things disappearing. Tell her how she had to lock her own tools away because certain little hands couldn't be trusted. I had been insulted in that house so many ways that I knew the shape of it before it landed. I knew the little pause before. Certain. I knew how Paige would flinch and then pretend she hadn't. I knew how Grant would stare at the wall, suddenly fascinated by water pipes. But this time the insult didn't hit the way Beverly expected. It passed through me and struck something older in my father. Daniel's face changed quietly. He didn't shout. He just lifted his hand from the bench and wiped sawdust off his palm against his pants, like he was getting ready to touch something clean. That's not why she locked it. Beverly laughed once. Don't rewrite your mother now. I'm not. His voice was low enough that everyone leaned in. Mom locked it because of me. The room went quiet in a different way. Even the man in the moving company polo stopped shifting his weight. Beverly's mouth tightened, but she didn't interrupt fast enough. My father touched the edge of the workbench. After Nora's mother left, I started selling off pieces from the shop. Not all at once. A plane here. A clamp set. I told myself I needed money, but mostly I couldn't stand coming down here and seeing Mom teach Nora things. I didn't have the patience to teach her myself. He swallowed. Mom found out when her rosewood marking knife disappeared. She didn't accuse Nora. She accused me. I felt the apron slip in my hand. For years, Beverly had made that basement into a place I had supposedly invaded. A place where every broken hinge, every missing screw, every scuff on the stairs could be pinned on the child no one wanted to defend. And now my father was saying the locked chest had never been a wall against me. It had been a wall around what Ruth was trying to save from him. Beverly's eyes flashed toward the pickup crew, then back to Daniel. That is private. No, he said. What you just tried to put on my daughter was private until you dragged it into the room. The word daughter did not sound like rescue this time. It sounded like a line he had finally found the nerve to stand on. Paige whispered, Daniel. But he shook his head without looking at her. Beverly moved fast then. Not toward him, but toward the footstool on the bench. She pointed at the cracked rail and the old broken leg she had staged with a bow. Fine. If we're all confessing, ask your daughter why she came back today, acting like she knew exactly where to look. Ask her why every broken thing in this house somehow becomes a speech about her. I didn't answer, because the lie was too tired to deserve the first word. Then Grant's wife spoke. Her name was Melissa, and until that moment, she had been almost invisible, standing behind Grant with her purse strap twisted twice around her wrist. She stepped forward just enough for Beverly to see her. That's not what happened. Grant snapped. Melissa. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were on me, and her face was miserable, not theatrical, not clean. After Nora put the gift by the garage, Beverly told Grant to open it and move it out of the way before Daniel saw it. He carried the stool into the sunroom and set the lemonade on it because she told him to. When he moved it back, he bumped the corner against the doorframe and the rail cracked. Melissa rubbed her thumb across her purse strap. Beverly got mad and told him to make it look like Nora had brought it that way. She tied the old broken leg with the bow because she said everyone already knew Nora was careless with Ruth's things. The sentence landed harder than a slap because it was not a grand revelation. It was ordinary, a doorframe, a careless carry, a decision made in irritation, then dressed up as my character flaw. That was how Beverly had always worked. Not by inventing a new world, but by tilting the one we were standing in until I slid to the bottom of it. Daniel turned to Grant. Is that true? Grant looked at Beverly, and that look answered before he did. It was an accident, he muttered. My father closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, the softness was gone. Then you fix accidents. You don't build a story around them. Beverly made one last reach for control. She pointed at the movers. This is my house too. I scheduled this pickup. I am not letting a garage full of junk hold up the remodel because Nora wants a childhood scene. Nobody moved. The pickup guys looked at Daniel now, not Beverly. It was a tiny shift, but I saw it. So did she. Daniel took the torn orange sticker from Beverly's clipboard and stuck it to his own shirt front. It would have been funny in another life, that bright label crooked over his party shirt, but no one laughed. Then put me on the pickup, he said, because if this leaves today, I leave with it. Beverly stared at him as if he had spoken in a language she had never allowed in her kitchen. Paige covered her mouth. Grant looked at the floor. Melissa started crying without sound. My father reached for the apron in my hands, not to take it, just to touch the stitched letters. Nora, he said, I don't get to ask you to trust me because I finally said one thing out loud. His thumb rested beside my name. But I can stop lying today. For a moment I couldn't speak. The garage blurred at the edges, not with forgiveness, not yet, but with the shock of having the room rearrange itself around the truth instead of around Beverly's comfort. One of the movers cleared his throat and said gently, Sir, what exactly are we taking? Daniel looked at me before he answered. Not Beverly. Not Paige. Me. And for the first time in that house, the question did not feel like a trap. It felt like the door to a decision I was allowed to make. For a second, nobody moved. Daniel had asked me what we were taking, and the question hung there like a door he had finally opened from the inside. The pickup crew stood halfway between work and escape, orange stickers in their hands, waiting for somebody with a steady voice. Beverly's face tightened as if the whole garage had betrayed her. Paige looked at me, then at the house, still hoping the problem might climb away by itself. I looked at Ruth's bench, the chest, the apron with my name stitched crooked in blue, and the spare turned leg in my palm. Then I said, "We're not taking trash. We're taking what she saved." Beverly gave a short laugh. "You don't get to inventory my house." Daniel turned so sharply that even Grant stopped shifting his weight. "It was my mother's house before it was ours," he said. "And I let you make Nora feel like a visitor in it. That ends today." Beverly opened her mouth, but one of the movers cleared his throat and said, carefully, "Sir, we just need to know what's going on the truck." It was the plainness of that sentence that changed the air. Not a family argument, not Beverly's theater. A real choice, with men paid by the hour standing beside the objects she had marked for disappearance. Daniel pointed to the row of things with orange stickers. "The broken particle board shelves can go. The cracked paint cans can go. The bench stays off that truck." He looked at me. "The chest goes wherever Nora says." My throat tightened, but I didn't rush to forgive him. I walked to the bench and laid Ruth's apron across it. The garage light caught the old flour dust or sawdust still ground into the pocket seams. I had spent years being told I had made too much out of scraps. Now the scraps were the only honest things in the room. Beverly stepped toward the bench. "This is absurd. That apron proves nothing." "It doesn't have to prove anything to you," I said. My voice surprised me because it did not shake. I picked up the spare turned leg and carried it to the footstool. Grant had dragged closer after Melissa spoke. The damaged corner looked ugly and exposed. I turned the leg once, feeling the shape Ruth's hands had saved, and fitted the old tenon against the cracked place where the repair needed to begin. It met the frame with a soft wooden click. It was not ready to hold weight, not yet. But it proved the joint still had a future. No document could have made that sound. No speech could have done what that little click did. The thing Beverly had mocked became repairable in front of everyone. Melissa covered her mouth. Grant stared at the floor. Paige whispered, "I didn't know." I believed her, and I also didn't let that help her. Daniel came beside me, not too close. "Mom taught you that?" he asked. "She let me hold pieces while glue dried," I said. "She said holding still was work too." His eyes closed for a moment, and when he opened them, they were wet. "I should have been the one holding still for you," he said. That was the closest he came to asking for forgiveness, and it was better than a performance. I nodded once, because I could accept the truth without handing him the whole broken thing and calling it repaired. Beverly grabbed her purse from the mudroom and said, "Fine. Keep the dungeon. Keep all of it. But don't expect me to live in a shrine." Daniel did not chase her. That may have been the first brave thing I ever saw him do, without raising his voice. He took the orange sticker off the chest and pressed the sticky side against his palm until it folded in on itself. "Then don't," he said. Beverly looked around for someone to save her from the sentence. Grant would not look up. Paige had started crying quietly. Melissa moved first, stepping aside so Beverly had a clear path to the door. And that tiny courtesy somehow made Beverly look smaller than any insult could have. When the mudroom door slammed, the garage did not feel peaceful. It felt bruised. But it was ours to breathe in. The movers loaded only what Daniel had named, and when one of them reached for Ruth's old clamp by mistake, I said, "That one stays," before Daniel could answer for me. The man set it back without question. Such a small thing, being obeyed the first time. It landed in me harder than an apology. Paige came over and touched the edge of the apron. "Nora, I'm sorry I kept telling you not to make it worse." I folded the apron once, keeping my name visible. "You didn't make it better," I said. She nodded like it hurt, and for once, I let the hurt belong to the person who had earned it. Daniel and I opened the chest last. Inside were not treasures, not secrets big enough to excuse anybody. There were sharpened pencils, brass hinges, a coffee can of screws, Ruth's block plane wrapped in an old dish towel, and a shallow wooden tray divided into little squares. In one square sat a missing footstool peg. In another was a bent blue needle with thread still through the eye. Daniel picked it up and gave a broken little laugh. "She hated leaving a job unfinished." I took the needle from him. "Then we won't." There was no grand family healing, no clean erasing of years, only a decision with weight. By late afternoon, the pickup truck left almost empty. The bench stayed against the garage wall, but the chest came with me. Daniel carried one end through the doorway, and I carried the other. At the threshold, he said, "I know this doesn't fix what I let happen." "Good," I said. "Don't ask it to." He nodded. Can I come by tomorrow and help repair the stool? I looked at his hands on the chest, older than I remembered, and I said, You can come by. If you listen more than you talk. He smiled once, small and ashamed and real. I can do that. That night, in my apartment, I set Ruth's chest under the window and put the apron over the back of my kitchen chair. I did not hang it like a relic. I did not hide it either. Before bed, I ran my thumb over the stitched letters of my name, and one blue thread caught lightly against the rough spot where the needle had knotted.